Welcome back, everybody. This is part two. Angelo and I are here with the fall line. This is Chaos and Company. I'm Dave Capron. This is Angelo Ross hanging out right up there in the corner. What's going on, buddy?
Just enjoying talking to Pete. Ready to
I am
sacred.
Yeah. I wished I'd kept writing questions. We had a part three. We just invite Pete back tomorrow night. We could keep talking, but we can't suck up all his time. But we are going to do some more tonight so that we can send it out part two. And Pete, thanks for staying with us. And what I'd like to do is kind of in two parts here. Talk a little bit about Pete Howard, the ski teacher, and then we'll do a part two kind of question more about Pete Howard, the examiner, because I think in a lot of ways those blend. In a lot of ways they're separate. I mean, I think I've learned a lot from you on these, that at times I have to blend those two together. And at times I have to really make sure that I'm in an examiner role or I'm in an educational role. And I want to start more with the educational one, that I love to watch you coach, because you just, when people start to be able to do something, or us idiots there at training are starting to catch on to something you're doing, you can see that you just go down that road. You can see it. It's just like I watch, and you can know when they're not getting it, when they're getting it. Like, did that come all the time with you, that you knew people were getting it or they weren't getting what you were doing? How do you see that?
Over the years, what you think you want them to get changes. But I would say that, part of why I like teaching a lot is that it's kind of like a lab experiment. And it's kind of like Christmas. You never know quite how it's going to come out. And, you open the present and see what you were given at lineup, and that's a lot of fun. And I guess you can't take the physical work out of learning. So people have to put out at whatever level is possible. That doesn't mean you push people too hard, but you got to find that sweet spot there that's both engaging, challenging, a little bit of risk, but not too much. And then when you see the results of that, then you start to go, okay, so I saw a little bit of a change there. I'm getting excited now. Let's see if I can anchor that and go a little further.
Yeah. And you have a little kind of think tank almost, or a little experiment pool that you have up there. You've skied with a group. It's either your Saturday or Sunday or both days, your seasonal group that you have, that you ski with you ski with them like every weekend, right?
Yeah, every Saturday for either 3 or 4 hours for most of the winter. And I've had some of the folks for 15 years or so. And they're great. And some of them have become staff members over time, and they go out west and they have fun at big mountains. And they're my lab experiment, because I'll often I do Sunday morning training at Sugarloaf. And so on Saturday, I'll run those guys through it, and I mean, that's not being very student centered. So I really probably shouldn't admit that, but I because they're equally skilled to many of the members of our staff, maybe it is somewhat student-centered.
But you enjoy challenging us. I know, because I mean, at times I'll be watching, from in your group, which I have been in the past, the training, and we'll be skiing a task, and then we'll get to a point like somewhere, and you'll just go, "Hey, let's try something different right now. Just let's do this," and you'll just take a different task, and I'm kind of going, "All right, is he really having us do something different? Or is he got something in the wizardry? He's having us do this to bring it back."
Well, I'm not sure that you give me too much credit for but you got to do different things, because if you do the same thing, nothing changes, right? So all of us have to be facilitators of risk. We have to push the envelope enough that it's interesting. If it's and Murmur uses the word failure. So, to a degree, you need a learning environment and a task that is difficult enough, but is still achievable, that it creates interest, possible failure, and over time, probable success. And so sometimes that means you have to completely abandon what task you thought you were doing based on the results you see and switch to something completely different.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's interesting, because I know Jeb has talked, and he did on the national, I can't remember the title of it, but it's the webinar that they did. It's on the national site, the webinar on the new national standards. He did most of that and Dave Schuling was on it. It was kind of a kicking back and forth. They went through all the new national standards, and he spoke about not teaching a progression, but trying to start a teaching segment and then continue to work with what you see in front of you, which is what we hope our members do and get to that point. It's really hard for the level ones to do that, but at level 2 and 3. And so this really works into that, because those things, like you're saying, that sometimes it's not working. You got to try something else. Or if they keep doing the same thing, what can I do to get them to do something different?
Right. And a long time ago, I guess it was at a level 3 exam, Joe Wood was our group leader, and he made us do the opposite of everything. And I really learned a lot from that. That was very interesting.
Yeah. And these are things that I know really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was, see if I can remember this right. A rut, when you get in a rut doing the same thing all the time, a rut is just a coffin with the ends kicked out. You're dying there. You got to do something different.
Oh, Angelo, I love it, man. He comes up with these things. It's like everybody out there now, when it gets chopped up on snow, we call it harbor chop. We got that from Pete Howard. We go skiing powder. We all get a run or two, and then here in the East, everything's narrow, and now we're skiing harbor chop for the rest of the day. But Angelo gets into this and a lot. I mean, his educational background, and Angelo loves to explore. I know he's not a snowboarder. He snowboards, but he's not the big snowboarder. He's not one of our Red Staff snowboarders, but he takes that philosophy with his skateboarding and that, loves to experiment. And he loves that you talked about in part 1 here in our other podcast with you. We just did that. He likes that, when you were speaking about the sessioning, like they do in the summer. I mean, Angelo does that. So he really enjoys that experimentation and just trying new things, huh, Angelo?
Well, that's how we learn too. Real similar to marching up the hill in the backyard and skiing down and maybe hitting a slick spot and ended up going into the neighbor's yard. We just did it on the ski hill, but walking up and down the bump run because it was faster than taking the chair. And all of that is learning. You're learning all the time. It never stops. You're learning. You're really learning how well your boots fit as you're walking back up that hill, right? If that's the right size or not, you're gonna know it. But it's that. It's like that complete effort, that really settles in as learning. Where sometimes it's easy to get lazy on the ski hill because you got a chair ride. First of all, you get to sit down half the time, right? And then when you sit down on the chair, sometimes you talk about what you're doing, but a lot of times you talk about something else. So, is the wiring still occurring in your brain at some level? Probably, but is it happening as much as if you're fully engaged in a physical activity, even if it's like unpleasant, And I think that's what a really good ski coach does is maximizes those moments that are right up against the edge of failure. Not too failure, but kind of tickling that line a little bit and crossing it and coming back and crossing it and coming back. That's powerful. That's powerful stuff. I understudied Pete a few years back. He probably doesn't even remember. It was, I don't know. It was at some event, some premier event. It was a difficult tasks in easy places.
Oh yeah.
And I just, and I'd love you to talk about that event for a minute, Pete, because I believe you wrote it. Like, I think that was your idea, but
yes, you did.
It was a few years ago. It changed the way I thought about teaching skiing, like in a minute. And it was just terrific.
So that was, I guess, the start of the event called Game Change Teaching. And it's really, there were three things that I felt in my career that got people to change their performance. And one of them was to do difficult things in easy places. And another one was turn shapes. And the last one was opposites. And so the reason that these things work so well is because you can tell if you're doing it or not. The difficult things in easy places, like traversing across a very gentle green slope on the little toe edge of your uphill ski, you can tell if you touch your foot to the ground or not, or if you're balanced, or if you can do that fairly easily, or if it's like a huge battle. And there's a reason why it works or doesn't. And the same with turn shapes. You can tell by looking at the tracks in the snow and so forth, the shape of the turn that you make. And then the opposite thing is obviously a pattern smashing thing. And that creates an awareness too. And so those three things are the core of that game change teaching event. And they were, it's a little selfish, but it's just based on the successes or not that I've had with customers over the years.
And experience is wealth.
What it put me in mind of just right from the very beginning, Pete, when I was with you for that event was it's like a guitar player, like playing scales. I'm gonna play it this way for a while, and I'm gonna go from the heavy string to the light string. Now I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna go up the neck. I'm gonna go down the neck, and that's how people get really good at playing the guitar, right? You got to play it, but you play it a bunch of different ways. And that's what you're doing. I think a lot of times these days, especially, people aren't playing the scales on their skis. They're riding up the chair, coming down the hill, making one turn shape, one turn size, and it's almost mindless a lot of times.
Yeah, well, I mean, they say Michaela does drills all the time, and whatever they are, the challenges in easy places or the turn shapes or whatever, those develop, I call it habits of accuracy. And, if you have those habits built into you, when you get in a troublesome place, they'll be with you. We're biological computers. We have kind of a default setting. That's the place that we go when, cognitive thought disappears and we just go into sort of reflex. And that's when we're in our default setting. And if we practice habits of accuracy through lots of different kinds of challenges, those habits will be there when we need them.
That doesn't sound like you want everybody to look exactly identical when they come down the hill. Like that, what I'm getting at, that's the opposite message of what we talked about in the previous episode, where folks assume PSIA wants them all to look the same. You're talking about athleticism wired in so deeply you can't help but be athletic.
That and the fundamentals are present.
Right.
When you need to stand in the middle of your feet, when you need to change from foot to foot, it's like Sean Smith used to say about skills. You need to be able to have a positive selective effect on any of the skills on either leg at any point in the turn. And but what you say about athleticism is certainly true. That Dave Merriam was my role model in that regard. He showed me that being athletic that's what the sport's about in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So when you go from being a ski teacher to a ski trainer, in terms of like going from the general public or just giving someone some feedback on their skiing to what we think of as training and training pros and for them to go out, or to train trainers to go work with staff, do you have to change mode a lot, Pete, or is it you take those same ski teaching philosophies into being that ski trainer?
I would say that I take the same philosophies with me. I may have a less student-centered goal and a more school-centered goal, in a sense. All of us have seasons in a way, when you've got your pre-season before Christmas, and then you've got your kind of downtime after Christmas and in January, and then you've got your February vacation, and people are firing up for certification and things like that. And so there is sort of a flow and change that goes on. And, at the beginning of the season, you want people to be excited about it. You want them to remember what they're doing out there, and you want them to have enough things to do with the customers so that everything goes well before Christmas. And particularly if you have a new hired staff, there's a certain amount of information and training that they need to have. And then as the season goes on, it's a challenge in a way to keep it inspirational when you have people that have been there 10 or 15 years. So you have to think creatively about that. And you need a staff that you can rotate, because people don't want to hear the same person all the time. And so if you have a staff of 5 or 6 or 8 people, and you have meetings now and then so you can keep a good focus going, it works out great.
So there has to be quite a few people you've worked with that are on staff. I'm thinking more on members and staff members that are going for certification. You've got to be pretty proud of how many people have had success that you've worked with.
For sure. That's it's always fun when somebody comes back and gives you a big hug, and I get to write their name on the chalkboard in the locker room and stuff like that. So that's very cool. Yeah. And, I think it's as long as somebody's prepared themselves, whether they're maintain their current status or move up in their certification level, that's fine, because it's really just about the education of it all. And so, as long as people try, wholeheartedly give it a try, that's great. That's all you can ask.
Yeah, it's to me, it's. I've seen you have that same reaction when you've seen somebody be successful. We've been in enough exams together, scoring, and that I've seen some people that have been coming through from Sugarloaf or from other places you've seen work really hard. And I know Chris Erickson gets on me because I tend not to wear my pin on anything, and it's not a reason if I don't like my pin or that you both know, and I think everybody listening here knows that I do love the experience I've had with PSIA, but it's more watching other people I get to work with reach those goals, and they had to do it. But just helping them along the way, the gratitude they have, to me, that is so awesome. And I've seen you smile, and you've had some folks we just had a few people make last year. We were calling it ETS, made it to examiner from Sugarloaf. You had some pretty big smiles. And when Troy Walsh made the national team, you had a pretty big smile.
Yeah, yes, I did, for sure. And, those things are well deserved. One of the things I think that a lot of the membership doesn't realize, or maybe they do, but most of us at one time or another had some setbacks, maybe one, maybe three. And we know what it feels like when, you're with your peers and for one reason or another, it didn't come together for you. And, I felt that at the time I went to the national team tryout. And I know that Troy had a couple tries at it, and most everybody has that. And so it's great when somebody's successful, for sure. When they're not, we understand. We know what it feels like.
Definitely know what it feels like. I've been there. Angelo's been there. We've all been there.
Been there.
Very few people go through and don't get a knock somewhere. I remember Peter Holland, who I miss so much. Peter Holland, what a great guy. And as we come into each season now that he's not around, it's like that passion he had for skiing. But Peter Holland, I know, was at one of our ed staff trainings when he was on the board. And he asked that question. The question came up, or somebody had asked him. It was during one of our training sessions, and everybody had to stand up that had got a ding or didn't pass one of the certification exams or a tryout. And Peter Holland was floored that like almost every single person, every single examiner stood up because all of us had got hit at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. And as you say, some of us many times, which is like, God, why do I have to be that person? But I was one of them.
Got hit hard. It's a hard hit.
Yes, it is. Oh, man. So which do you enjoy more, Pete? Do you enjoy more being that ski teacher and just teaching a lesson, or the training? Like is one mean more? Are they different? The same?
I really like, and unfortunately, it's the adult group lesson is sort of my favorite lesson. And unfortunately, they seem to be kind of going away. So I guess I would say that adult privates would be my favorite. But what I really like about it is, there's very seldom have people explained and shown skiing to some of the customers I have in a real accurate way. And so it's really nice when I can do that and they can come away with a big wow factor. Like, wow, I really feel a change. Yeah. I like that. I like training staff and I like working with PSIA members for sure. I feel a little more responsibility, and it makes me a little nervous because, my customer, I may see him again and maybe not. But whereas, with PSIA and my training staff or the staff I'm with, I'm going to see them again for sure. And so, I feel extra responsibility that it comes out well.
Yeah. And that responsibility definitely moves into our exams in terms of now their assessments. But I like to kind of put, because history has, you and I have done a lot of exams. We're now starting to do assessments as of last year. And that responsibility I've seen since the beginning, man. We didn't have, when I first came on the ed staff for Alpine, I don't think we had a coach per se. We didn't have a listed coach like we did when Jeb took the examiner coach role, then Matt, and now Sue. But I definitely looked to many, but definitely you were kind of almost like that. When I came to exams, you were the coach. And there was definitely a responsibility that you made known, I felt. I mean, I thought it was pretty clear to me that we had a huge responsibility when we took that role of scoring.
Well, I agree. And I should credit Pete Palmer with a guy that I looked up to who spent a lot of time sort of as a chief examiner, a guy that ran a lot of events. And, he was very influential to me. And I thank the guy a lot for all he's done for me. I guess, the responsibility of it, when we get together as a team, maybe the members don't all know this, but we have, a meeting prior to the exams that we do, and we talk about what we think the conditions are going to be and the tasks that we're going to do and where we're going to do them and how we're going to talk about it and so forth. And to a degree, this has been made easier by our new process, so that the words that we use and the things that we ask and the scoring that we do is more similar. But we always strove for that in our exam meetings before beforehand. And yeah.
So how do you because I know I do, I look at teaching that when I'm coaching somebody, I'm assessing. I might not be putting an actual score on it, but I'm assessing their movements to see, are they doing what I'm asking them to do, and what are the fundamentals? Which fundamental are they struggling with? How much of your coaching for you comes in your mind into when you're scoring folks at an exam? Like, is it super easy to just separate the two? Do they blend together for you?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me, Dave, but there certainly are times that I'd love to say, "Hey, time out. I want to help you all with this."
Yeah.
But you can't do that at an exam. I don't know if that's what you.
Well, yeah, a little bit. I mean, yeah, a little bit, because there's like a switch we have to pull. That, like, I mean, I've been with you, I know personally, in an exam. I don't know if I might have been when I was understudying, then also when we've been scoring in the pairs, that I just want to tell somebody something. That coach comes out into me like, if I just told them this and had them try this, I bet you they could do that. And we can't do that. But I still turn on that coach's thing in my head to be able to look at what they're doing and then try to figure out, is it because of the task or what we've said to do? So it's really neat in the new assessments that we're doing now that we can vary the task. Where in the past, we didn't vary the task as much. So it's almost like I'm not coaching, but when we as a pair change the task to say, we're going to ski this one slower, or we're going to ski open parallel now with a little more edge, then we'll ski with a little less edge, I can see the difference and find out if it was something in the interpretation they didn't get. That's where I'm getting at. Is like, do you feel like you can add those nuances from your coaching in some of our exams and assessments?
I think that's certainly possible. I think it's more possible now than it was. I think that being able to ask to do the same task, but with different skill blends, different speeds, that shows a nimbleness and an agility that is telltale of are the fundamentals owned. And if you can't vary things, then you got to wonder, okay, why is that? And it's, the body performance needs to change to change the ski performance on the snow. Having the variability to, in a sense, fly your body in different ways is the hallmark of a skier who has touch and timing and an ownership of fundamentals.
Yeah. The skillful skier, as Matt Boyd likes to say, be a skillful skier. Oh, Angelo's shaking his head. He's thinking. I can tell when he's thinking.
Well, that doesn't mean you have to go fast or anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Can you be a skillful skier slowly and bump?
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've heard Mr. Shostak go, "Slow down. I'm not even going to watch you if you ski that fast. You're just a garbage truck out of control."
Pete, what's your typical ski day? What's your warm up process? That doesn't necessarily start on the hill. Like if you have something you start at home or on the way up to the hill or whatever, what do you do?
Usually, so our parking lots are downhill a ways, and so we walk up through 3 or 4 parking lots to get to the ski area. I would say that I try to stretch quite a lot, either the night before or the next morning, depending on how I'm feeling. And I usually try to take an easy run at first, or easy for me, and build up the intensity from there. I usually don't ski past 2:30 if possible because it's dark. Mm-hmm. I can't see. So, the only time I like to ski past 2:30 is if it's still snowing and everybody else is tired and gone in.
Yeah, yeah, that's not bad.
Good.
So he's being pretty quiet on his prep too. You asked him just to prep for his day, but you prep pretty good for the ski season. You're up and down ladders and you're carrying bricks and doing the mason thing. So you're working hard, but you make sure you get ready for ski season, even when you're not doing just mason work.
Right. So my sort of theory is shock therapy. And what I mean by that is shocking my body. So and it's just me, the way my body works is if I just bike ride all the time, it's like my body gets used to it. And so what I do is I'll go for a mountain bike ride one day, and then maybe the next day I'll put on a wetsuit and scrub the bottom of my boat. And then maybe the next day I'll climb up a ladder and build a staging on top of a roof. And then I have I usually go bike riding quite a bit. Sometimes it'll be the mountain bike if it's wet or gravelly or dirty or it's cold. And then sometimes it's a road bike. I also have one of those skier's edge machines in the garage. And so I use that when it's like it is now, November, damp, cold, dark. Just go out in the garage and bounce around for 15 minutes. I have a solar flex machine in the back room with big rubber washers on it and pull on that now and then. And then some stretching, and I got a pull-up bar out in the hall. So I just try to find ways that, I tell people about exercise equipment. You just got to use it. And that equipment may just be your body and gravity, but you just got to use it. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see all that stuff on the side of the road for free, because people don't use it.
I love it. Angelo, before you go, have you heard Pete? Pete has said this one. I say it all the time on the hill. Pete has said, at some point, to be a skier, you must participate. He says it better than that, but it's like, this is a sport, and at some point, you must participate.
Yeah. It's like a cake. You get out of it what you put into it, and yeah.
So Pete, I have a really solid training staff at my home hill, and I challenged them yesterday at our first meeting of the season that when they hear someone say the fundamentals, I've challenged them to always say which ones, because now we're working with at least 3 sets. We've got technical fundamentals, which we've been working with for a decade, right? And it makes a lot of sense why our brains go to the technical fundamentals when we say the fundamentals. But how do you prep for the other ones? Because I know you to be a very conscientious person. Had the pleasure of rooming with you at 2 national academies and watching you operate when you're the student, which is awesome to see. But so when you consider now the people skills fundamentals and the teaching fundamentals, where's your head with that in terms of you getting ready for a winter?
The teaching skills piece of it, I look at a lot like the learning environment. And that's a multifaceted thing. It's not just where you're standing. It's, your delivery, your word choice, because there's an emotional environment that's part of the learning environment as well. And, our customers, they come to us with their ideas and their mannerisms and their motivations, and we really have to learn what those are by just some easy questioning and then listening, and then picking and managing both the emotional and physical environment so that learning can occur. And that's sort of how I think about the the teaching skill piece of it. I would say one of my thoughts about the technical skills, or how well you ski or ride, and how good you are at watching movements and so forth and analyzing that. If you can do that almost automatically, that allows you to do the teaching skills and the people skills with greater attention and greater freedom. And so like for newer staff members, it's really important that they begin to get a good handle on the technical skills so they can focus on who is in front of them. We used to talk about the what, the why, the how, and the who. And, the what, the why, and the how is all driven by who is in front of you.
I've said on this podcast before, when I was teaching in the high school, I didn't even realize there were kids in the room for about the first 4 years because I was so concerned about content. I was so concerned about the technical parts of the biology that I had to teach. I didn't have the bandwidth to consider, to spend a lot of time thinking about individual student motivations and how am I going to teach, structure this lesson from a teaching standpoint. It was all about trying to memorize the Krebs cycle and cellular respiration. And I think that's true no matter what you're teaching. I totally agree that, that you have to get a handle on the content, but I like the attention we're drawing to the teaching and the people now. The folks getting into this from the get-go, this is their first or second year. If they decide to become involved with PSIA, ASI, their baseline is going to be all the sets of standards, not just the technical. And I think, you look ahead 20 years, I think that just that fact alone is really going to change the way snow sports instruction happens in the United States moving forward. I think we're at the beginning of a real steep improvement curve.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I like, you said the word bandwidth, and it just keyed off something in my mind. It's that to do this job of snow sports coaching well, you got to have a really wide bandwidth because you have to pick the learning environment, pay attention to the safety, develop a relationship with people, have the technical skills and the ability to show it. It's just so much. It's just so much more than passing donuts out the window.
So when it comes to good teaching, Pete, who is it, and this one I'm kind of putting you in the spot, so we can even go back and delete it if you don't want to answer this question, but is there a name or two or that made you smile and you were like, this is good teaching? Is there somebody you can go watch, or somebody on our staff, on the national team? Who is it and what do they do in the coaching that you go, wow, that's good?
So certainly I've been really fortunate, and maybe he's like that with everybody, but Mike Rogan has been really nice to me over the years, and I've had a chance to ski with him in a national academy, and he's let me watch the national team, and he's talked to me about this and that, and that's just been great. And watching him coach is good. He's cheerful, and he'll tell you just enough, and it's usually insightful, and he's just a beautiful model to watch, and he's good enough that you just want to bang your head against the wall every now and then. Go, why can't I do that?
Yes, I completely understand that feeling. That's cool. And ski wise, not necessarily who, but what is it when you watch skiing? And this is Pete Howard. This doesn't have to be Pete Howard, the fundamental. What makes you smile when you watch skiing? What is good skiing to you that you go, wow, that was awesome?
So, it's a little hard for me to say because there's a lot of things that I love the athleticism that some people show me, the way they can just basically use the the energy out of one turn to just send it to the next one, And some people might say, oh, the pressure management's a little off or too extreme, but when you can do that, that's great. And then in another case, I really admire skiers, and Mike would be one that's just super accurate all the time. There's nothing out of place. It works great, and nothing seems to stop it. It's wonderful. And then the last thing that I like to see is people who have touch, people who can do sort of odd things on the snow. And Joe Wood was one of those guys. He would slide up to you at about 2 miles an hour and stand on one foot and just slowly rotate around till he was facing you. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And, if you looked really carefully, there was a slight convex bump right under the foot that he used to turn around. But Mike Porter is another guy that he just sort of floats out of a turn and into the next turn. And it's beautiful to watch, So the energy, the accuracy, and the touch, right?
Yeah.
And that's beautiful to see. And yeah.
Well, that's cool. And you talked a little bit about during the podcast here of Pete Palmer and mentioned Joe Wood. And I know you had a lot of connection and were there a long time with Woody Woodward and even Otto that I didn't get to, who else was influences on you?
Well, Jimmy Ackerson.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many people remember Jimmy. He went on to he was actually the director of Portillo, Chile before Mike Rogan. And he now lives in Chile. And he was on the Eastern Ed staff quite a long time ago. And he was a guy who was a beautiful skier, very accurate. And I admired him, very professional. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Michael talked, I think, quite a bit in a couple of the podcasts about Jimmy Ackerson when we had Michael on. And so I got to meet him sometime. We might have to have him on the podcast at some point, Angelo. We'll have to reach out.
We ought to do that live from
Portillo. You got to go international, man.
Yeah, right.
Well, well, absolutely. So how about Woody Woodward? I mentioned Woody. I had over 20 years working with Woody at Attitash. Just amazing. God, did he love to beat on me in a good way, in a very good way. But he'd come down for a little pie and coffee down here at the house every fall. We'd chat before we headed back. But what were some of your experiences with Woody?
Well, you know Woody better than I do. I spent more time with him, My experience with Woody was mostly that he knew little details about certain things that nobody else said and nobody else saw. And I thought that was pretty neat, and he knew stuff about people who were learning to ski and where their turning came from and those kind of things.
Yeah, he was amazing.
That's one of the things that I think that to a degree we've lost a little bit in our organization. Where turning comes from. Yeah. We all talk about turning the lower body more so than the upper body. But there's way more to it than that. And it's nuanced and it's mixed. And I see the turning force as the engine that drives a skier. And, I know from teaching private lessons, sometimes when you pull the engine and you don't have enough time to put it back in, learning didn't occur. Confusion
occurred. So you've had the pleasure of scoring many of our tryouts here for Ed staff and for Eastern team. Those that want to go out and try out for the national team, you scored the national team tryout. I had to be there and yuck it up and mess it up in front of you myself when you were scoring the national team tryout. And so it's like, oh God, Pete's scoring these. Now he's out here. I'm going to really embarrass myself. But we've got an Eastern team tryout this winter. It's coming up in March, I believe the 15th, 16th at Killington of March for our Eastern team to pick our team to go for the next national team tryout. What's some advice from the trainer, the experience from Pete, the scorer, for those that should start, who are thinking about it and want to go for the Eastern team tryout?
Well, I think that whoever goes needs to go to ski at a big ski area for quite a while if they haven't done that on a regular basis, because there's going to come a time where it's going to be difficult conditions, and you don't have to, I mean, you can survive it, but you're not going to make the team surviving it. You got to own it. You got to make it look like you own it. And that's hard unless you spend time in those places. And I really admire the guys and gals from the East that have gone out West, because I know from my experience, it's hard when there are no trees around. Maybe the light's a little weird. The snow's not normally what you ski on, and you can't really tell how far the run is or how fast you're going until your run is over. And then you go, nah, I should have done that different. So,
So my last question, Pete, for the podcast for you, and I know Angelo always has something because he deserves to ask some smart things at the end after I screw it all up, is what are you looking forward to this winter? Is it the sharing? Is it the teaching, the skiing? Is it the cold feet? I know you have those big boot muffs that you wear, those blue ones that come from skiing up at Sugarloaf. But I mean, what is it Pete Howard right now is like anxious, that little, because I know that little 6-8-year-old kid's in there thinking about getting on snow. And
I mean, I like the cut up windblown stuff, that you can kind of get into, but kind of stay on top of, with a few bumps thrown in there to keep you honest. And I like spring corn snow bumps on a late March afternoon. I like Sugarloaf, they used to call it the Indianapolis of the East in Powder Magazine, because we have the only FIS downhill in the East there. And on a January day when nobody's around and the machines have been out, you can go 65 miles an hour there without anybody batting an eye. And that's fun sometimes. And the other thing I like, is driving back from Pro Jam on a winter night to see the Christmas lights on my way home. Yeah. And that's cool too. So
cool. Yeah. Angelo, what do you have for Pete?
I wish I had something impressive. I don't. I'm curious about the see your skis behind you, Pete. Want to tell folks why you chose those skis? Because I think sometimes people choose their equipment based on what somebody else picked, but I don't suspect you ever do that. So if you don't mind talking about what you've got there and why you picked them.
Right. So one of them is like a 179, basically a GS ski. And I picked that for those days when there's corduroy and nobody's around, and I can go right along. And I also actually, believe it or not, I like narrow skis in most conditions. They're a little easier on my knees. The tips don't get deflected all around. They slice through stuff instead of bouncing around. But then the other pair are 100 underfoot, and they're pretty short, and they're for banging around in the trees. So I've got the polar opposites there, and I have a couple left over from last year that I'll probably run at the beginning of the year, and we'll see what the snow conditions are. Yeah.
Well, I hope you get enough conditions to ski them all this year.
Me too. You too.
Yeah. Pete, I want to thank you for coming on with us. It's a pleasure. Appreciate your time and here for the podcast tonight. But I'd also like to just thank you for all the support and training and coaching, and I hope it doesn't stop, because I have a lot more to learn. I know, man, all I have to do is listen to Pete and listen to many others, Dave Wan and Murmur and Terry and Jeb and just the crew we get to learn from. And so I hope that I can still keep picking your brain, because it's awesome, the experience and the knowledge base and the giving nature you have to share it is really cool. I appreciate that, and I thank you.
You guys are great too, and all of the ed staff that's putting their time in and working their way up, and they know a whole lot too. So I don't consider myself any much different anyway.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. It's a great show. I've enjoyed watching some of them.
Looking forward to seeing you soon, Pete. About 10 days or so, right?
10 days, and we finally get to hang out. I'm looking forward to that. Seeing everybody skiing, a little coaching, a little MA, more rock and roll. So, Pete Howard, thank you so much. Thanks everybody out there for listening. It's always a pleasure, my buddy Angelo. Love doing these with you. And this has been the Fall Line with Chaos and Company.